This is a lecture from October 9th, 2020 on meiosis, or the process of making gametes, or sex cells. And for this lecture, we're going to define several terms that are important to understanding meiosis and the process of how it works. We're also going to talk about the two major goals of meiosis and how they're actually achieved, while listing the phases and what happens in each of these phases of meiosis. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about diseases that are related to errors in the meiosis process. Okay, and so in order to understand meiosis, we need to make sure that we understand a little bit about how DNA is organized within the cell. And so DNA is organized in discrete structures made up of DNA and proteins called chromosomes. And chromosomes are located generally in the nucleus. And you can see these X-shaped chromosomes here. Most of the cells in your body, or the somatic cells, are diploid, which means they have 2 copies of each chromosome. Whereas most of your gametes or eggs and sperm, are what are called haploid cells that have only 1 copy of each chromosome. Okay, and so diploid cells have 2 copies, haploid cells have 1. And so in diploid cells, or in most of the cells in our body, chromosomes come in pairs, right? Because you have to have 2 copies of each chromosome. And so humans have 22 chromosomes as well as a sex chromosome to make a total of 23 different chromosomes. And these chromosomes come in pairs. So we have a total of 46 chromosomes in our normal body cells. And if these chromosomes are members of the same pair, so for example, chromosome 1 on the left and chromosome 1 on the right, they're what's known as homologous to each other. And homo, as we know, that root word means same, right? And so these chromosomes come from the same pair. Not only do they come from the same pair, they're pretty much the same size, as you can see here. And they have the same genes for the same traits at the same positions. And so these colors are actually showing different sequences of the DNA. And what you can see when you look at the homologous chromosomes, these 2 copies of, say, chromosome 1, is that those colors match up exactly. Right? And that's because they have the same genes located at the same position in these chromosomes. And so what makes up each of these pairs is 1 copy of the chromosomes that's paternal or from dad, and 1 copy of the chromosomes that's from mom or maternal, right? So we have 2 copies of each of the 23 chromosomes, 1 from mom and 1 from dad. And so what you'll see here in this schematic on the bottom is that you have a paternal chromosome in blue and a maternal chromosome in red. These would be considered homologous chromosomes. When they replicate during the cell cycle to form the X-shaped structure, they become what's known as a homologous pair, because they're still homologous, right? They're still the same. Except now, instead of it being homologous individuals like this one and this one, they're homologous pairs, 2 and 2. Right? And these are going to become important as we continue to talk through the process of meiosis. Okay. And so I'd like for you to take a second, pause the video, and think about how many total chromosomes a human skin cell would have, and how many total chromosomes a human sperm cell will have. Right? So pause the video, take a second, and come up with your answers for these questions. And so a human skin cell is a normal body cell, or a somatic cell. Right? So it has 23 chromosomes in pairs, or 46 total chromosomes. Whereas a sperm cell is a sex cell, or gamete, and it has half of that number, only 1 copy of each chromosome, because it's a haploid cell, and so it has 23. And so the process of meiosis in general is to create haploid gametes, or haploid sex cells. And so a gamete is basically a sex cell. It has N chromosomes, or 1N, basically one copy, right, of each chromosome, or is haploid. And a haploid sperm cell and a haploid egg cell can come together during fertilization to create a zygote, or basically a union of two haploid gametes. And that zygote has two copies of each chromosome, or is 2N, or is diploid. And meiosis is a special type of cell division that basically generates these haploid cells that can ultimately come together to form new organisms. And so the goals of meiosis are to reduce the number of chromosomes in half, as well as to create genetic diversity. And we're going to talk about how meiosis achieves these goals and why they're important in the next part of the lecture.